So welcome, Barry, to Reframe Your Mindset for Success. How are you?
Good, thank you, Paul. Yes, very good. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. What have you been up to recently?
Very busy at the moment. We set up a new company last year, which sort of enables people to have sort of big adventures and trying to sort of support people in their quests to have those big adventures. And it's quite a mammoth at the moment, so it's taking all of my time at the moment.
Oh, brilliant. Sounds really exciting, interesting stuff.
Yeah, it's good. It's good doing that and helping people. With I'm doing a bit of social media for getting people commentary for people who are trying to row across oceans at the moment. So, had one crew come in a couple of days ago, and I got another one coming in a couple of days from now. So, it's exciting to be involved in all that sort of stuff. And even though I'm sat at home in lockdown, I'm sort of living my life through other people.
Oh, brilliant. It's going to be really interesting to find out a little bit more about that as we go through. But I am going to take you back a step because I know that when we first met, and I'm going back a good number of years now. Part of your story was that you'd actually rode the Pacific Ocean. And I was just wondering if you could share a little bit about that for us, and maybe we could take it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we met back in 2014 when I just got back from Hawaii after rowing across from California in the world's first human-powered race across that ocean. And it sort of came about because I'm not a rower. I've never been to sea before. Before I'd done that, I never rowed a boat before, even on the river. But it was my dad. Basically, he had been in the military, and he'd been my inspiration to go out there and do things, and all these amazing stories that he would come home with every time he came home about all these adventures he'd been on in the military. I wanted to do that. But I wasn't able to join the military because of my asthma and epilepsy. And once I found out that I couldn't do that, I kind of didn't have any way in life. I was like, this is what I want to do. I cannot do that. Whatever happens, I cannot do that just because of that bit of paper. And so I sort of went down the path most travelled and got an 8 to 5 working in the post room of the bank where I met you. But then my dad got very ill, and he was in a coma, and we got told that he was going to pass away, and we got given this sort of leaflet about coping with loss. And it was, I think, the trigger moment that created change. I remember thinking, okay, so he's had all these amazing adventures all around the world, and he's and I can't do those, but I was always so inspired by what he was doing. How was my child, who was 7 at the time, how could he be inspired by what I do? I lick stamps for a living. How can he be inspired? So with that, I decided that I was going to do these big adventures. I realized I just didn't have to join the military to do it. There's more than one way to skin a cat. Basically, I could do those adventures in a completely different way. And so with that, I sort of put myself out there as someone that wanted to do something, and very quickly found a guy who was looking for people to help him row as a 4 across the Pacific Ocean in this race. It was very much, none of us had any experience. The team fell apart. We got another team that fell apart. We didn't actually find crew member number 3 until the night before we flew to California. Didn't find the last member until we were in California. Our boat, we got about 6 days before the race started, and we were genuinely known as the Jamaican bobsled team of that race. The boat was, messy and dirty, and most of the electrics were frazzled, and it started to sink as we started to row it across the ocean. But we definitely shouldn't really have been there, but we did very well. There was only 6 people that made it across in that race, so most boats didn't make it across, and we broke the pre-race world record by 19 days. So we were really pleased with what we were able to do as people who had no rowing experience or ocean experience at all.
That is absolutely amazing. I mean, to go from, as you mentioned there, to have no rowing experience at all, to then go and row the Pacific Ocean. No, it's not what most people do. How did you get from no experience at all to actually in the boat and rowing the ocean itself? And well, what was it there? Obviously, you said it was about your dad, and that was the reason you wanted to do it. But how did you go from no experience to Did you feel like
I think I
adventure?
think I think that ties in well with your podcast, but I think it is about mindset, and I don't know if it's necessarily any kind of strength or weakness in mindset. It's just a frame of mindset in that, you know, I was always brought up, and it was my mum that always used to say, you know, you can be whoever you wanted to be, and I genuinely believed that, until I started getting told you can't join the military. And I remember thinking, yeah, I can't. Why can't I join the military? I can't be whoever I want to be if I can't join the military. The military is a fallback job for so many people, you know, and I can't even get that. So I certainly can't be whoever I want to be in life. And so because I lost that focus, I very much became I became a little closed-minded, but that sort of trigger event reopened up that original mindset that I had, that I could do everything, you know, be whoever I wanted to be, and I just started thinking about through my life, you know, in granular detail, you know, why do I want to join the military? And don't get me wrong, I'm very pleased I didn't join the military. It's not something that is on my to-do list anymore. But it was the reason I wanted to join was not because of the uniform or being screamed at by a drill sergeant. It was to have those adventures. And once you start to think of the end goal, and you break down things into a more granular level, and you realize, well, actually there's far more ways of having adventures than just join the military. That's just perhaps a common way of doing it, but it's only one way of doing it. So for me, that was it was going back to sort of how I'd been brought up, in the fact that I could do whatever, could be whoever I wanted to be, and
Right,
I've always
I'm
had
with
that
you.
mindset, I think, to be able to just go and do something. And, you know, if you turn up and can't do it, then you.
So a big part of that's around your self belief as well, isn't it? And I know one of the things that you mentioned to me when you were first telling me about what you did was the amount that you read prior to, you know, rowing the ocean. That you got as many books as you could about ocean rowing and read through them, and that's how you started to prepare yourself, because it was something that you didn't fully understand, but you needed to know what good looks like.
Yeah, and I think that's important with lots of things. I think, you know, and it's how you develop mindset generally. You know, I think that mindset. I love mindset. I think it can be the reason I love it is because once you understand it, you can wake up one morning and just decide that I'm going to be this kind of person. From now on, this is what I'm going to do. And that's a really powerful tool when you really look at it and you think, well, I can completely change what I think about myself. It can make you a worse person or a better person. However, and those are the sort of extreme reframings of mindset, I think. But for me, I think mindset is also cultivated. I think it's something that's a gradual change, and something that you can either be have happen to you. You know, you're watching with your mother telling you what to do in life, or you make those decisions yourself in order to cultivate it. So, like you say, when I got involved well, I didn't even know that rowing an ocean was possible. When I first found out that it was, I read every single book that I could find on the issue. Watched every video, every film. I found out these people that were in these books, and these people that kept cropping up, and I found out where they lived, and I got in touch with them, which is, you know, probably a little bit of a psycho thing to do, but it's that's the sort of person you're dealing with here. So I go out to those people, and I made the sort of ocean rowing community my friends, whether they liked it or not. You know, I didn't just go and meet them and come away. I made them part of my circle of friends. And I think by immersing yourself in that environment, and it can be quite an uncomfortable environment because you don't know it, but by immersing yourself in that rather uncomfortable environment, you start to pick up things, you know. But very quickly, I was able to sort of think like an ocean rower and make decisions like an ocean rower, and I was analyzing risk like an ocean rower. And before long, I knew more about ocean rowing than most people on the planet, and I hadn't even set foot in a boat. And I think it's a conscious decision to change your mindset. It's not an instant thing, but it's an over time thing. And the more you immerse yourself in that world, your mindset shifts to share some of those qualities.
That's absolutely brilliant advice, and obviously you've learned that through experience as well, and the mindset to be able to do that. Um, when you actually then finished the Pacific row, how did that feel? Because obviously everything had been about the journey up till then, and eventually you get to the destination of you've completed the row. So what was that like?
it's a strange place to be. It's incredible. There is no question about it. For me, doing that row was life changing, no question about it. But perhaps not in the ways that I thought it was going to be. And I think I almost naively thought that I would now be a famous person or something like. I don't really know what I was expecting, but
Yeah, yeah,
I do remember coming back to work and walking in and nobody having any idea about what had gone on and what I'd done, and it just seemed all very, very strange all of a sudden. But what it did was create a calm place within me, sitting on the oars, because you row 24 hours a day, 2 hours on, 2 hours off, 24 hours a day. It's sitting on the oars in the middle of the night. You've got shooting stars above you and the Milky Way, and you're sort of staring into sort of the endlessness of space, and you have lots of time to think, and it makes you realize the things that are important to you, the things that you would like to do more of when you're home, and it really, I don't know, separates you, makes you feel. It gives you a huge amount, and I found it hard to go back to work, because you've done something like this where you're making life or death decisions every 5 minutes, and suddenly you're back in the office, and Gareth from 3 desks down is losing his mind over someone moving his stapler without his express permission, or someone's exploded because the wrong cost center's been used. I understand that it's wrong, but I can't understand the sort of apoplectic rage. So there was this sort of element of disconnect when I got back. What it did though was give me a different aspect on my world, my own personal aspect on my own personal world, and I sort of, it very clearly said to me, you absolutely can do those, anything you put your mind to, and it's been nice to be able to go on and do more things like that in the future, and be able to support other people in those.
yeah. That's such a way of developing your mindset through experience, and obviously, such a profound experience as well. So going from the ocean row, that first ocean row. Obviously, I know that you then went on to row the Indian Ocean, but that in between phase, then, so you've achieved the dream, and then I mean, when we talked, the amazing thing that I got from you was that literally because you'd rowed the ocean, you felt that nothing could stop you. You kind of had this "nothing's going to stop me" mindset. And I don't know if you were then doing some running in between the next row. But could you talk to us just a little bit about then your mindset after you completed the row, and then the types of things that you were doing before you then build up to the Indian Ocean row?
Yeah, I think that coming back from those sort of things is very difficult to sort of fit back into normal life, but it did make me realize that. So when I first came back, I was just eating, and I was having, large kebabs and takeaways every single night, and I was not interested in going to the gym. And I think the problem was that I'd sort of almost felt like I'd self-actuated. I'd reached that goal, that absolute pinnacle that I'd always been working towards. And now that I'd rowed an ocean, I will always be an ocean rower. That'll never change. It doesn't matter how fat and diabetic that I get. I'll never not be an ocean rower, which is quite a toxic mindset, really. You sort of realize that you've made it, sort of thing, and that's the end of it. So I realized fairly quickly that I needed to find a new Everest, and I needed something to work towards. I knew that I couldn't actually climb Everest because the Pacific cost an absolute fortune to get involved with, and I'll be paying it off till the day I die, I think. But it was, finding something that was going to put me outside of my comfort zone, something that I couldn't do, that I could aim towards doing. So, as I say, no money, but I had a pair of trainers, and I used to enjoy running, and I wanted to be a long distance runner, and I could never get the long distances. I couldn't. The furthest I'd ever run was a half marathon, and I'd had to walk, to the end of that. So I wasn't very good at long distance running, but that's what I quite enjoyed, the sort of challenge of it, the endurance element of it. So I got a pair of trainers and I started running when I got back, and I did about 25 meters around the track, and that was as much as I could manage, because you lose the ability to walk whilst you're rowing an ocean. And then I kept going every day, and getting a bit further and a bit further. I built it up, and then by the end of the first month back in the country, I did like a thing called a Tough Mudder, so it's like a fun run with mud and stuff. But it's essentially 12 miles long, so it was. But I did it very easily, and I thought, well, no, this is just about as far as I've ever run in my life. Yet I was struggling beforehand, and now I found that fairly easy. So I sort of pushed it a little bit further. And the end of the next month, I ran a marathon, and twice as far as I've ever run in my life. And don't get me wrong, it was hard, very hard, but it was completely doable. And so the month after, I ran an ultra marathon, and I've gone on to do sort of lots of different sort of ultra marathons around the place, and it's often with no training at all, and which is not a sensible thing to do. Physically, it's not an advisable thing to do at all. But it's that mindset where I think if you achieve something that's the pinnacle of what you think is possible, and you achieve it well, and you come back well from it, it does give you that sort of sense that you can take on anything you want to take on. I think if I was a serious runner, what I was doing was be very, very silly. But the fact that I was just trying to achieve things that were outside of my comfort zone, and kept on trying to do things that were more than I think I could do, was a really cathartic thing for me to do. And it doesn't always work. There was a race earlier last year where I got picked up face down on the floor in the middle of the road by a car that was coming past because I was completely unconscious. It's just, it doesn't always work at all. But, that mindset to be able to put yourself out of your comfort zone and almost becoming, comfortable with being uncomfortable, which I don't really like that saying. I think that doesn't make any sense, but it's almost that, living, you can't be comfortable with being uncomfortable, but I think being uncomfortable or seeing it as a challenge rather than something to be feared is incredibly powerful, because every time you go out of your comfort zone, you broaden your mindset, you change your aspect on life, you see more things, you have more opportunities.
So that's an amazing type of mindset to have. So, to be able to get yourself in a place where you're basically unstoppable in a way. Um, so going from there then to the Indian Ocean row, because obviously you've rowed an ocean. Was that I've now got to row another? I've got a couple of oceans left to go, so I'm going to tick them off. Or was there something more to the fact that you chose the Indian Ocean row, say, over the Atlantic Ocean row?
So the Indian came about because there's something quite magical almost about being on the ocean in a rowing boat, and all the feelings and things that are associated with it. So I certainly can't say that it was a selfless act to row across the Indian Ocean. It was something that I wanted to do, and I do want to row across the Atlantic. But the Indian Ocean came about because we'd had the opportunity to do the Pacific. We'd done it. We put all our credit cards on the line for it, all our savings, took massive loans out, and we'd done it. To then go and put loads more money into something else, just for the pleasure of doing it, just seemed almost selfish in some way. And we realized that what we were doing they were quite powerful projects, these ocean rows, and we could actually use them to put something on a pedestal, perhaps do some research. And we were pretty passionate about young onset Parkinson's disease, and we wanted to do some research into that field. So we worked with Oxford Brookes University, and we felt that the best way we could highlight the issue of young onset Parkinson's disease was by recruiting someone that actually had that illness. And so we found Robin, who was fantastic, just perfect for what we wanted to do. And he'd been diagnosed the year before and found that diagnosis very difficult. And it's quite a long story, but in short, we decided to do the Indian Ocean because it's thought of as the most difficult out of the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian. And we wanted it to be a massive challenge. We didn't want to do a token crossing to say, look, a Parkinson's person can get across. We wanted to do something that would genuinely challenge everybody on that boat, and that person be part of it. And the research that we did was really interesting. There was lots of blood taken and brain hats on to take lots of different readings and lots of training. But essentially, when Robin got on the boat in Australia, his Parkinson's symptoms were quite a severe shake, a very severe limp. He'd drag his foot behind him and he would lock up. And then when we got to the other side in Mauritius, all of his physical symptoms of Parkinson's disease were absent, completely absent. Now, we hadn't fixed Parkinson's disease; that wasn't what was happening. But what we had done is we were able to reduce the symptoms to an almost zero level, so that dealing with Parkinson's disease became a lot easier for him to do. We were then able to replicate that in a gym, and with a diet, we discovered that Parkinson's people use carbohydrates in a slightly different way to people without Parkinson's. So we were able to put someone on a ketogenic diet under observation by the professors at the university, put them on this very strict regime, and their symptoms also reduced to almost zero. So that was what the whole idea of doing the Indian was. It had to be, we wanted to give something back, we wanted to shine a light on something, we wanted to create opportunity for people, and the research. I mean, if I do nothing else for the rest of my days, we'll be incredibly proud of that research. It was amazing to see the difference in Robin. Yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. To think that not only you've got to do something that you love, but to be able to give something back as well, and to obviously have those positive findings to help people with Parkinson's disease, it is absolutely brilliant. So going from the Indian Ocean Road then to just back to, so what is it you're doing now? So the last time we'd really spoken in detail was around the end of the Indian Ocean Road. So you started to talk about the work that you have been doing to help other ocean rowers and adventurers. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, of course. So we set up a company called Monkey Fist Adventures, and that is a company that is designed to create adventure. So it's multifaceted, and we've got lots of different ideas, and it's in its early years at the moment. But the idea is to, at the moment, we're trying to build a bit of a following, but then it will be about creating opportunities for people that you may not think could do something, or may not think they could, or doing something like what we did with Robin, which was doing research through extreme adventure. And our sort of bag is ocean rowing. So we started off doing with that. So we did an Atlantic row last year, with another lady with Parkinson's disease, and then next month we're doing another ocean row so I'm not going to go on the actual row. I'm going to be doing the comms, but it's going to be my colleague Billy, and then Matthew Pritchard, who used to be on Dirty Sanchez on MTV,
Yeah,
and a chap called Martin Hesseltine, who is 60 years old, who a lot of people are saying, how is he going to make it across? But there are plenty of people who are older than him that have done it as well. And another guy called Johnny Ward, who is an Irishman who left home when he was young, started traveling and never stopped, and made his money traveling around the world, and he has visited every single country in the world. So there's some real fascinating characters on board this crossing. So it's going to be a really, really amazing adventure to follow. And I'm going to do a little plug. You can follow it over at monkeyfistadventures.com. But
brilliant.
yeah, it's going to be that's leaving next month, and it's going to be a really fascinating thing to follow. And then from there, we're looking at doing things like developing an app which will connect adventurers with other adventurers, so that they can take on these things. And that would be anything from climbing Everest or rowing an ocean to, just trying out surfboarding one day. It just connects you with like-minded people who know what they're talking about, or might know what they're talking about, or can point you in the right direction. And for us, it's about creating communities and creating opportunities for people that perhaps you wouldn't expect to be able to do something like that.
Wow, that sounds brilliant. Some of the work that you're doing there, and the creativity and innovation that's come into play there as well, with developing the app and connecting people who want to go on their own adventures. So I'm just going to go back to a couple of things, because obviously we're focused on mindset, and we've got what's not your full story, obviously, but a snapshot of your story and the things that you've achieved and the things that you're doing now. So if I was to ask you, why is mindset so important in what you do, what would you say?
I think it has to be, as far as I'm concerned. I'm, it's certainly not physical strength. I've got these sort of little noodle arms. I'm no James Cracknell, but I genuinely feel that, and it's probably cliche, but I genuinely feel that mental strength can get you through almost everything. We talk about training for ocean rows, and absolutely physical training. The more physical training you do, the less mental strength you will need to overcome the hurdles. But there's no question in my mind that most people could row an ocean tomorrow. It's not the physical strength that's there. It's the mental strength, and I say that with quite a lot of clarity. A friend of mine, Angela Madsen, has rowed 5 oceans in her life, and she was 62 this year, and she is paralyzed from the waist down. So physically, pretty much everyone listening could row an ocean tomorrow. I can guarantee that. It's the mental side of things. It's the mindset that to do it in the first place, or to want to do it in the first place, or to achieve it in the first place, that is absolutely key. And it certainly is for me. As I say, I am not a physical specimen. I just had a trigger event that gave me a jolt, changed my life, changed my mindset, and that genuinely changed my life.
Brilliant,
And also,
brilliant.
sorry, Paul, it's not.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a key to happiness either. It's not a magic fix. I'm still the same idiot that licks stamps in a post room. It's just it just unlocks so much more potential in your life, and gives you so much more opportunity. I think once you're clear in your mind that you can control your mindset, it just allows you to achieve stuff that's kind of way beyond your imagination.
Brilliant. And how would you actually describe your mindset then? I mean, there's so much that you've talked about already, but how would you describe it?
Yeah, I think it's funny with mindset. I think in order to be the sort of absolute best version of yourself at any one time, it does require a shift in mindset. And I think we do that, as I was talking about before, but it's cultivated over time. Our mindset slowly shifts, or we can sort of wake up one morning and decide, now I'm going to be this sort of person. But I think probably the most recent example is kind of working in this current climate. This climate that we're in with the pandemic and everything that goes with it has been such an enormous shift for everybody. And you either shift or you get left behind. And there's so many people that have gone, well, I can't do it because of COVID. And at the same time, I'm looking at going, well, there are absolutely some really important things that we need to be doing, and we absolutely should be adhering to all the advice that we've been given about social distancing and masking up. But there's still ways of getting things done even in that climate, and it's entirely up to you. There is you can decide not to do that, and there's a very, very good excuse not to do it. But I feel that there's an awful lot of people doing incredible things in the middle of this pandemic, because they've just shifted their mindset. They've reframed that mindset, and now they're focused in a different way.
And if you were to give practical mindset tips, I mean, obviously your whole story is there's plenty of tips in there, full stop, from start to finish. But the practical tips that maybe you've used in to be able to row the ocean or to do what you're doing currently.
Yeah, I think that kind of like that, what I was talking about where you read everything and get involved. So I think it's really important to be clear in your mind what you want to achieve. Regardless of whether you're the right fit or you have the right training or you're that sort of person, I think you need to spend quite a lot of time focusing on exactly what is it that I want. It's not joining the military, it's having those adventures, or maybe it is the uniform, whatever it is. Find out what's the end goal that you need. And I think that's very, very important. And then once you know that, once you're very, very clear, it makes it a lot easier to then focus your mindset in the right direction. I guess it's like trying to play football without your glasses on. If you can't see where the goal is, you aren't going to be scoring, or you're unlikely to be able to score. If you've got crystal clear vision because you've got a crystal clear goal in your mind, then you're much, much, much more likely to score that goal. And I think once that focus is in place, it's important just to be bold and kind of immerse yourself in whatever it is that you're wanting to be. I can't speak Japanese, but it ain't going to stop me going to Japan. And when I'm in Japan, I will, whilst I'm there, I'll pick up words. And if I'm there for long enough, I'll pick up phrases. And if I'm there for long enough, I will become fluent in Japanese. I'll become the expert by immersing myself in experts, and it will be an uncomfortable place to go when I cannot speak any Japanese. But by putting yourself out of that sort of comfort zone as much as possible, I think it's absolutely the key. As far as I'm concerned, putting yourself out of your comfort zone as much as you can is key to success in that one.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you were to, and I'm not too sure, it might just be the experiences that you had that have developed your mindset and the mindset that you've now got. But is there anybody, or maybe more than one person, who's helped you develop your mindset? And what did they teach you if they did?
I think that, as you say, mindset changes, lots of different influencing factors in mindset. I think, originally my mum was a huge contributor to my mindset. My dad certainly, which I think is very common for many people. And then you've got sort of the very obvious ones in my world, that people when I was younger that I idolized, like people like Ranulph Fiennes. Who sort of sets, that's part of allowing yourself to crystallize what that goal is by seeing other people doing that kind of thing. I think as far as ocean rowing is concerned, it was a community cultivation. It was community change. So immersing myself in that community, and there was particular people that I met. Particularly at the beginning, there was a guy called John Haskell who's become just an amazing friend throughout my life since. Who is just someone that wanted to support me. And without sort of embarrassing you too much, Paul, but people like yourself, when I came back from the Pacific Ocean, I really was struggling to get back into normality, and you very much solidified what I could do when I got back. I came back, and you came and saw me and said, "Can you do a talk about it?" And I said, "Absolutely not. That's the most terrifying thing that I've ever done. You've just rowed an ocean. You must be able to talk about it." And I absolutely couldn't. And so you build it up. You put me in. You said, "Well, just tell me the story." And then next thing, you put me with a couple of people and said, "Just tell them the story." And then 6 people, tell them the story. And then it was 15 people, and built up until I was doing, big auditoriums with giant screens and audio, visual, and music, and everything other than the smoke machine going on. It was an absolute enabling experience in my life. So, I certainly couldn't put it down to one single person, but there are some key people in my life that have absolutely helped to change my mindset when I really needed it.
Brilliant, and great to be part of that. Obviously, and seeing how your talks just, they just, one, you had an amazing story, but two, seeing you grow from talking to a couple of people to that full auditorium was absolutely amazing. And obviously something now that you do for a living as a motivational speaker. If you were then to just finish with, obviously with all these adventures that you've been on, is there any kind of fun story that you'd pick out that, you'd be willing to share, that was obviously safe to share as well? I'm sure there's been many, but
no, it's all terrible, Paul. It's horrendous out there. It's constantly getting hit by flying fish and all.
The swordfish are the worry, aren't they?
Yeah. There's the Atlantic race that's going on at the moment, and there's only been 2 swordfish strikes, so with a sword going through the boat, in the last 11 years. But this year, as of this morning, there's been 4 swordfish strikes, so that's a bit of a worry. But
Wow.
I guess there's hundreds of things, but one thing that always stands out for me was during the Indian Ocean row, and it was such an intense crossing. That the storms were phenomenal. It was a really challenging crossing, swell upwards of 60 to 70 feet. It was absolutely insane. But we were sort of battling along, and we started making some good ground, and we were about 8 days away from the end in Mauritius, and we were in this huge storm. I was on my own on the oars. Robin was got quite ill, and he wasn't able to row, so I was on my own on the oars in the middle of the night, 3:00 in the morning. And you were sometimes coming off the oars with almost like car crash symptoms, with almost like whiplash, because sometimes these waves would, because it was pitch dark, so you just see like all the stars start disappearing as the waves come up, and then sometimes they would land on the top of your head and crush your neck down, and it really. But I think the one time where I've been on the ocean where I thought, this isn't particularly handy, and this one big huge wave came, massive great big wave, smashed into the boat, and it kicked the whole boat round sideways.
Wow.
And then whilst we were sideways, this other huge wave came roaring up, smashed into the boat, and we capsized. So I was in the water with about a ton of boat over my head, 3 o'clock in the morning in this gigantic storm in the middle of the Indian Ocean. It wasn't the handiest place to be, but we're very safe when we do these things. So I was connected to the boat by a metal cable, and the boat, the wave, the next wave hit us. It lifted the boat up, and the whole boat started surfing down this wave with me being dragged along
Oh
by
my
this
God.
cable, all upside down. And I mean, in my world, I thought it lasted about a minute and a half, but it was probably about 3 seconds. But it just surfing down this wave. There's foam and can't breathe and all the other things. And the boat eventually self-righted as it's supposed to do, and somehow or other I feel like I fell out of a wave onto the boat, but ended up on the
Back in the
boat,
boat.
back on the seat. And I remember seeing my hands just shaking with all the adrenaline that's coming through me. And the fore cabin Billy threw the hatch open to see if I was still alive, which I was, which was good. But he'd left the top hatch open, so when we'd capsized, all the water had come in through the top hatch.
Oh
So
no.
he was soaking wet. The pair of them were soaking wet, which was hilarious if you were me. And then James opened up his hatch, and he'd been eating chicken korma. So he had chicken korma all over his face, all on his beard, and there was this sort of yellow streak of chicken korma all the way around the inside of the boat. So it made me laugh anyway.
Well, the fact that you've flown out of the, you went out of the boat and then straight back in. It's like your Jurassic Park moments with it. We're back in the car.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Brilliant. So I'm gonna close off there. So thanks very much for coming along. If you were to give one bit of final advice when it comes to mindset, what would it be?
I think what I've talked about so far, I think rings true. There's a couple of things that I wanted to touch on. One of them isn't so much about mindset, but it's kind of the difference between mental health and mental strength. And I remember I've always struggled with mental health issues, and they came to a head this year. And the reason I didn't go and get any help with it was because, as you say, I speak for a living, and doing these sort of talks about mental strength, and I'm sitting there going, well, I can't even eat my Rice Krispies without having a meltdown. Something I can't tell anyone about this. And it was that sort of realization once I got the support. They're absolutely different things, and I know that this isn't quite mind frame, but I think in the current climate it's an important one to touch on.
Absolutely.
The difference between mental strength and mental health are two completely different things. You can be the strongest man in the world, you can be Eddie Hall still gets sick, he still gets colds, and in some times he gets sick because of his strength. So mental health and mental strength are two completely different things. They just share a common word, and that's about the only linking element. So that was something that very, very important that I learned this year about getting that support. Everyone always says get support, and I think people think, well, until you're about to go off a bridge, then you don't do that. But no, people would much rather speak to you when you're not at that stage and help you out. So that was something that I did want to just touch on, because I just think it's a really important thing in this current climate. But I mean, as far as mindset's concerned, I think it's really what I've talked about throughout, and it's essentially that, in my mind, comfort is the atrophy of mindset. I see comfort as a similar thing to sort of food. We need both of those things. We have to have food to survive, and we have to have rest and recuperation to survive. But if we eat too much food, then that is not healthy for us, and we become fat and we become lazy. And it's exactly the same with comfort. If we take too much comfort, then we become fat and lazy, and it rots our mind. It's the atrophy of positive mindset, and I guess it's all about things like going to the gym. It's not a comfortable thing to do. It's uncomfortable, but it helps you out. But it goes further than just physical fitness or a physical feeling of uncomfort. It's talking to someone in a bar when you feel like that's uncomfortable, or it's meeting someone, or it's going somewhere that's uncomfortable. All of these things, every time you do it, it becomes easier and makes it part of your arsenal in life. And I think that absolutely, if that was my final bit of advice, I'd say that we need comfort, we need rest and recuperation, but too much is a bad thing, and comfort is very much the atrophy of mindset.
Well, they are two brilliant pieces of advice, especially in the times of uncertainty and change that we're living in right now. So I'm going to conclude there. Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you for coming on the podcast,
No worries.
sharing your story, obviously giving us insights into your mindset and things that you've experienced. It's been amazing, absolutely amazing. So thank you very much, Barry.
Thanks for having me on, Paul.